Hello and welcome to the Success Rate podcast. My name is Thuli Magubane. This is where we have an interesting conversation with an individual who's made a mark in their sector. And if you want to hear more of these kind of stories, make sure that you subscribe to the Success Rate podcast. Click on the notification button so that you know when we're posting new episodes. And right now we're joined by maybe someone you may not have heard of unless you're in the finance sector. His name is Zwelakhe Mnguni. He's the founder and CIO of Benguela Global Fund Managers. And he has an interesting story to share with you. And finance is one of those sectors which is still pretty much white dominated, but he's certainly made his mark in the finance sector. Welcome, Zwelakhe.
Thank you, Tilly. Thank you
It's
for
good to
having
have
me.
you.
Thank you for having me.
I know finance is one of those sectors that Black people kind of stay away from. So, what attracted you to the finance space?
It's a good question. Look, I just got attracted by the fact that there's so much to learn.
Mm.
Okay, so especially the kind of finance that we are doing,
Yes.
where we invest people's monies, and the underlying principle is you have to know what to invest in.
Mm.
And because of that, there's so much to learn. So
Yes.
every day we learn about different industries. You can go semiconductors, you can go pharmaceuticals, and then these are complicated industries. You can go to the simple things, engineering, and all. You always have to understand what is happening within those companies, and so that's really what attracted me, but what has also helped me to stay in it.
I know the backstory, and I would like you to share a little bit about your backstory. I know that when you finished matric, you weren't fortunate enough to have a bursary or your family be able to actually put you through tertiary, and you had to work your way up there.
True. Yeah, I think. First of all, I always say this is a story of most Black people that I know.
True.
And I was fortunate that I kind of had exposures to certain opportunities. And I think oftentimes we think about opportunity and privilege only being when you are higher up. But generally, there are always opportunities where you can move and get your upward mobility. My story started where, like as you said, when I finished matric, I was sitting at home in Sebokeng and didn't really have a job and didn't have money to study. At the time, my desire was to study at Durban Westville University, which I never got to.
Yes.
And the opportunity came when a family friend came to me and said, I know that you guys have matric, you don't like the dirty work, but I suggest that you take this job. You guys need to go dig trenches to basically pipe the water from one section of the township, which was zone 17, to what is zone 20 today. And essentially, we dug those trenches and basically got paid. If I remember well, it was 60 rand per cubic meter.
Yeah.
So, and he then said, look, save up all that money, and then you can go to the security academy, and you can then start having a more predictable income because you said you want to go study. And really, I followed that path. I ended up at the security academy, and after security academy, I started working as a security guard. Wasn't always the easiest job, but I think I remember my first pay packet was 893 rands.
Oh, wow.
That was 1994. And I worked there, and obviously with a family that was challenged financially. So I had to take care of my parents, my grandparents, my sisters, but also save up. So I started saving at 50 rand a month.
Wow.
And so there was a lady at the bank that helped me, and she would give me encouragement. So every time I saved money, she would say to me, you can do a bit more, you can do a bit more. And add 25 rand.
Yes, yeah.
Eventually, when I got promoted, my mission became that the entire promotion, which took me to 1,400, was to save that entire amount of money. And beyond that, I was able to then join a company, a chemicals company, big chemicals company. as a security guard again. And I literally left a role where I was in a managerial role and got to a lower role because all I wanted was money.
Yes.
So I took that role, and basically we were getting paid substantially more, almost double what I was getting paid as a manager.
Yeah.
And I saved the entire additional income, saved up to go to university. And I went to what was known now, I think it's called University of Johannesburg. It was Rand Afrikaans University.
Rao, good old Rao.
It was a good university, and
Yes.
studied accounting there. And beyond that, I mean, as they say, the rest is history.
I like that. The rest is history. And I think your story is very inspirational in terms of you didn't wait for someone to be your savior. You took advice from the person who gave you the advice, and you took a less attractive path, if I can call it that. And you're here now, And for those who don't know what Zwelakhe does, maybe you should just give them context in terms of where you've come from and where you're at now.
Okay. So today I run a investment firm with 7 billion rands in assets under management and 19 people, highly educated professional people that I work with. I'm fortunate to have that. And we take that 7.7 billion rand and decide where to invest it.
Yes.
There is money that is invested in South Africa, that is money that is invested in global markets. And I think one of the things that I take pride in, we are probably one of the first black firms to get a license from Ireland, the regulator for listed, or at least for regulated funds in Ireland.
Yes.
So in the history of South Africa, we're probably one of the first. And we are running, I mean, we invest all the way from Japan, all the way to Peru, wherever. And the benefit is that we are looking for returns for South African investors so that they can retire comfortably. So yes, I'm leading that team, but I'm fortunate to have quite a lot of fantastic people in the team.
And what Zwelakhe hasn't told you, Benguela has won 2 years in a row the APSIP Global Fund Manager of the Year. So well done to you.
Thank you.
And so we're talking about success. I want to pose a question to you. So what is success to you? How do you define success?
I would probably say success, first of all, in its primary form, is achieving what you set for yourself to achieve.
Okay.
Right? And so that is, for me, in absolute terms, that's what success means. But there is also relative success, where you say, relative to where I was, right? You are successful in that you've moved up to a certain level of life. And there is also another relative context where you now aspire to certain levels. So one of the things that why I co-founded Benguela was the industry, the South African industry, especially, as you said, in financial services, investment management, it has struggled to transform.
Yes.
There are many black professionals who are in big firms, or at least the incumbent established firms, that were not being given the opportunity to grow and be the best they can be. Right? Okay. And many of us left those businesses to start businesses of our own. And for me, the big thing was to try and say, we have a lot of global firms that are coming to South Africa. They take in the assets from South Africans and they go manage them from London, New York, Japan, Tokyo, wherever. And they charge fees. The fees that they charge on those assets go to creating jobs in those countries.
True, yes.
They go to paying taxes in those countries. They also go into uplifting community upliftment programs in those countries. And my thing was, why can't we do it ourselves, right? And so for me, success is that we have gone from nothing, and if you go even further, say I've gone where I was a security guard to where I am fighting a national battle, a battle that seeks to establish us as South Africans as capable people in any field, and me representing the financial services and investment management fields. That is for me how I see success.
Okay, great. And of course, attached to success are the material things, the money, the big car, the big house. So, yeah, so I just want to talk about money. And I think us as Black people don't talk about money often enough. It's a topic that we shy away from. So, with you, what kind of conversations do you wish we were having as Black people around money?
I think for me, the most important thing is when you're dealing with money, separating the future from the current, right? So, and always being conscious that the future is unknown.
Yes.
So, as you generate money, know what relates to now, which is consumption now, and know what relates to the future where it's unknown. You might be unemployed in future. You might have challenges in future. What makes me sad oftentimes about sometimes our people, not because they don't want to, but it's because they're less informed in many occasions, that a lot of their money spent on the current. How do I look today? Do people perceive me like as I've made it today? Versus when they lose a job, for example, now they back to a situation that is worse than what people perceive them to. That is why I say when you think about money, you almost have to think about the current and the future. So that's how I think about money. So I mean, if you think about, I often say, don't peak too early. So I would not want people to perceive me as I've made it if I haven't really made it. So we as Blacks, we spend a lot of money on consumption, which is the today. The fancy, the branded things, those things are catching us. And we never spend enough on the future.
True. And also, when it comes to investments, I've seen a lot of financial services companies promoting funeral plans and funeral cover to Black people as opposed to other investment products.
True.
Maybe educate our audience why a funeral plan is not an investment product.
Yeah, I guess it's also a cultural thing where we end up worrying about how the funeral is going to look. But I think the investment plans on the investment products, it's actually far more important than the funeral things, because if you can secure the future for your children before you worry about how you look, I think to me that would be success.
Yes.
Right? So if I could look 30 today, but I've secured my kids' future, I think that'd be great. So a lot of times we worry about the current and then the end. So I think that we need to focus a lot more on investment. And why investment? There's different types of things. There's savings, which may be things that you need in emergency now, and there's investment, which is long term. And investment speaks to your ability to have the foresight to say, at a certain point in time, I may need to retire.
True.
And I think what matters is finding that balance between the current, which is the consumption, the investment, which is your long-term plans, and having, if you're thinking about the end, you worry about the end, have that as an element. But currently, as you say, a lot of our people are spending way too much money on the funeral covers. And in many cases, they are over-covered.
Some have 3-4 funeral plans, yes.
And you actually need some of that money. You could take that money into investment, because what if nobody dies? What if what's going to happen? You need to think about the future. And it's always about thinking about, it's a privilege to even be in a position where you can pay for a funeral cover. Having 4,
I know.
it's not going to help, right?
Yes.
Why don't we put away some of that money for the 3 and actually invest that money and think long-term about that kind of money?
That's so true. But anyway, we want to find out more about you. So you studied, you got your BCom, and you went into the financial services industry. So when you started, did you feel like you belonged there, or did you suffer from the imposter syndrome?
No, I think initially, I mean, I was fortunate. I was in a firm where the leaders were actually very focused about the South Africa that Mandela was talking about at the time. But obviously, when you work on the ground, you do have experience, and some experiences were unpleasant. I mean, I remember a guy that I worked with, a very senior guy. He said to me, my accent is very bad.
Oh, no.
And I need to be taken to a course for pronunciation.
To polish you up. Oh, my goodness. Yes, yeah.
So that has stuck with me, because it has taught me that it's very hard sometimes for people to accept who we are.
Yes.
Right? And I've made it a point that in our business, I often tell my colleagues and say, I don't care about the person's accent. Right? And I do care about their ability to think and make the best investment decision for the client. So back then, those things mattered. Those people that could speak with
Model C, so-called Model C accent, yes.
So, but I felt that I was, a lot of times during my career, I felt I was out of place, and I was, like you say, the imposter, because I didn't feel like I was accepted as I was, with my African roots, with who I am, with my poverty background. It felt like you were actually disadvantaged by being in that position,
in that environment,
the background. Yeah.
So how did you find the motivation to continue and rise up and get to a point where as a CIO?
I think if you look at the fact that the lessons I learned when I was a security guard were very, very handy. And I used to say to myself when I was a security guard, because I mean, remember, people had just come out of, we had just voted in the new South Africa, but in people's minds and hearts, they were still crying for the old South Africa.
Okay.
And what it meant was that you had to be very tactical about how you navigate your way through this. For example, you find that we used to be posted on the tower with a gun, right? And oftentimes in winter, the black guys used to be posted there because it's very cold, right?
No. Yes.
And unless you knew what you wanted, you'd complain and cause drama, and then they get rid of you. Right? So the same thing, I took that mindset, and when I was working in the financial services in asset management, when I saw things that I didn't believe were fair, and I always said to myself, actually, I need to focus on why I am here.
Okay.
I am not here for this drama. I am not here for this skewed perspectives. I need to focus on where I want to be. And hopefully when I am there, I can do it better. Yeah. Success comes from hard work. Success comes from being tactical. There are certain things that could come and almost disturb your journey And you have to be tactical enough to be able to sidestep those things and remain back on your main course.
Yeah.
So yes, you have to work hard, and I mean you talk about me. You also work hard. Sometimes you work on weekends, drive all the way to the most far-flung areas of South Africa. But the truth is, success requires hard work, and you cannot succeed if you're always thinking about, oh, I'm suffering. And that's my attitude. I think that I have to do what it takes to get the outcome that I'm hoping for.
And actually talking about suffering, so how did you learn to become comfortable with being uncomfortable? Become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I think the most important thing is focusing on the big goal. What is it that you're trying to achieve? And I think if you look at that and always keep that in mind in everything that you do, what are you trying to achieve? And yes, you may be uncomfortable. Yes, you may go sleep. The other day, went to a conference and was supposed to sleep in a car until somebody that I trained years ago came to me and said, listen, you won't sleep in a car while I'm here. Yes. Come, I'll make you sleep in my room and I'll vacate the room myself and go sleep with somebody else. But what I'm highlighting is that unless you are willing, because oftentimes the hard things are not hard because they are hard. They are hard because we perceive them to be hard. So sleeping in a car for one night, and if that sleeping in the car delivers an outcome that can get you to where you need to be, it is worth it, right? So I've become comfortable about the hard things because I always think about what outcome. If the outcome is worth sleeping in the car, I'm going to do it.
Then you would do it. And then what about some of the sacrifices? I mean, as you mentioned that along the way, it's not easy to get to a place where you can say, I'm successful. There's a lot of sacrifices along the way. Maybe just tell us one or two sacrifices that you had to make.
Look, I mean, one of the sacrifices that I've had to make is family time. I've got 3 boys, and I try and spend time with them over the weekend. But during the week, I often see them in the morning when I take them to school, and then I'll see them the next morning. So it's a big sacrifice, right? And you have to build infrastructure around you that enables your success without making a severe sacrifice on the people around you. So yes, the family, and I've read lots of books about people who've made it. You can go Steve Jobs, anybody.
Yes.
You will not succeed without sacrifice, or at least succeed meaningfully. You will not succeed meaningfully without sacrifice. And for me, things like money, they become secondary. The most important thing is we are fighting a battle, almost a second generation or second version of the battle where we are trying to liberate ourselves as South Africans from our money being managed by foreign firms. And that is worth fighting for. That is worth sacrificing for. And I think the sacrifices, I always say to my kids, I mean, I talk to them a lot about it, and I say to them, it is worth it. And oftentimes I'll take them to work with me. And
another word that a lot of people don't like talking about is a D word, discipline.
Yeah.
To you, how did you manage to, discipline yourself in order to attain whatever you set out for yourself?
I think for me, what gives me a lot of discipline is to see people who are on a path to success falling and crumbling because they lack discipline.
Yeah.
That for me is always a motivation, because I almost sit and say, you know how that story went where there was no discipline, and this is how it ended. And it often gives me a lot of discipline. So, for example, the discipline not to consume
Yes.
or excessively consume is something that I've noticed where, for example, my own uncle was a multimillionaire at the beginning of the 80s. And he ended up in extreme poverty, right? And when I asked him, say, what do you think you got wrong? He says, I forgot where I came from. And that thing always rings in my head that you need to be disciplined because, firstly, you have to remember where you came from because you could always go back to that.
Yeah.
Secondly, look at the people who looked untouchable in terms of they had made it or they were on their way to make it. And then lack of discipline collapsed them. So it's almost, for me, it's something, the fear of failure is what keeps me disciplined.
Okay. But have you failed? It's fear of failure. I was going to talk about failure, so you brought it up.
Lots of times. I mean, when I was doing my honors, I was trying to be good at because I was doing it part-time. I was trying to be good at my work. And because I was attracted to my work, I failed honors. And I come from a background where I'd never failed.
Yes, yeah.
And it tasted sour in my mouth.
Okay. And what did you learn from that experience?
I think the lesson I took out of it is to say, you have to have priorities.
Okay.
And you have to know what priorities matters most at this point in time.
Yes.
Because if your goal is to get an honors degree and you are in a work environment, maybe talk to your boss. And I was fortunate, my boss was very understanding. But talk to your boss to say, I need to run on a low tone.
Yes, yeah.
And actually be able to get this outcome. And then once this outcome is, I'll put all my energies into it.
Yes,
and
yeah.
I think the lesson from failure is learning to be vulnerable, learning to be open about challenges,
Yes.
but also learning to be honest to yourself, to say, I can't do this. Because I did the honors in accounting, and then when I failed, I changed to the honors in finance. Because I realized that what was required from the accounting and auditing was way too much. And I'd rather do honors in finance. And that's what I did, and did it very successfully.
No, I'm glad that at least you took away some valuable lessons from that. So another important aspect to success is mindset.
Yeah.
And also, I also would like you to also reflect on this. You mentioned the story of your uncle, how you moved from being a multimillionaire to, poverty.
Yeah.
And for me, I've seen it with individuals who've managed to amass a whole lot of money, but end up, like the show is called, blowing it. So for me, it's the mindset, and obviously you deal with money and I guess creating wealth for other individuals. How important is mindset when it comes to growing wealth and maintaining wealth?
I'd probably say that the most important thing, even when you have money or exposed to money, is trying to remain understated. It's such an important thing that, sometimes when you have money and you want people to see that you've made it, if you can be humble enough to remain understated so that you don't create an unreasonable expectation from people on you, because that puts you under pressure. And that may skew your future versus current allocation of capital.
Yes, yeah.
Because now you might have to move what you had for the future, bring it here so that you can prove that you've made it. So I think mindset matters. It matters that you have to be willing to be understated, humble at all times. Because that way, nobody expects anything from you. And because nobody expects anything from you, you are then able to execute on your own plans rather than somebody else's plans.
I mean, I heard that Warren Buffett still drives his old car, lives in his original house, and he hasn't really gone and upgraded his lifestyle. So is that the model you're following?
Definitely, I believe in that wholeheartedly. I think it is better that way than if you go and overstate your success and then you come tumbling down for whatever reason, and you are a lesson of how not to.
Do you think you've attained a level of success that you wanted to achieve?
I think I've exceeded that level that I wanted to achieve. Because remember, all I ever wanted to do in my life was to be, initially my goal was to be an equity analyst.
Yes.
The next goal was to be the portfolio manager, right? To be the CIO of a globally focused investment firm that is able to execute in any country around the world. I believe I've exceeded those goals. The goals that I haven't exceeded are financial.
When you made your first million, how did you feel?
I thought I could make more. I'll tell you a true story.
Yeah.
It actually made me even more tighter.
It's like attainable, because we always, when you're starting out, you set the million as a target.
True.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I need to make the next one quicker. So I stop spending on anything. I've got shoes that I'm wearing that are like 10 years old.
Yeah.
The strange thing is, I kept the shoes that I bought before I went to university with the security money.
Yeah.
And I kept them because I wanted my kids to see them. Right? But I think the point is, before you get to that level, you're always thinking, I might not make it. But then you make it and you're like, oh, it's doable. I need to do it, but I need to do it quicker this time.
Half the time, in half the time. And so what lessons are you imparting to your children? So I get that hard work is one of those. They've seen you pull long hours. But what other lessons are you imparting to your sons?
I try and teach them. I mean, I struggle with it, but I try and teach them that just be ordinary. I mean, kids they get peer pressure at school where they want to wear branded clothes and those type of things. I mean, I say to them, here's your budget. You can choose to go buy 2 branded clothes versus you can buy quite a few things that are or less popular brands, and you can have something left. So the lesson I'm trying to teach them is more around money, how to manage money, but also how to manage yourself and leave something always for a rainy day. And that's really the lesson. So be humble, treat money with respect.
Yes.
And work hard and be disciplined. Those are really.
That's an interesting one. So when you say treat money with respect, what do you mean?
I mean that when you have money today, consider it to be a privilege, right? And don't think that I can spend this one, there's another one that's coming, because it might not come, right? So I always say to them, treat money with respect, that you don't give it away easily, right? So try and retain it, because for as long as you can, because having that money gives you a lot more optionality. And you may rush to spend this money today, but you might have actually put it into better use in future. And certainly that's something that I try and say to them, and initially it was hard, but I can see they're starting to get it, but it's still hard because there's peer pressure behind
True,
it.
yes.
But
They want those fancy sneakers and all of that.
And I always say to them, treat money with respect. Respect money. And my uncle that I was telling you about, that's one of the things that he also said. He said, I always spend money thinking that
more will come.
More will come. And what had happened was I had back then I had a 1 cent in, those old money. And I was playing with it, kicking it. And he said to me, listen, don't do that with money. You need to respect money.
Yes.
There are many people who are underground mining to get that 1 cent that you are kicking like this. And that was back then in the 80s. But the lesson has stuck with me that treat money with respect. Don't play around with it.
And your parting shots when it comes to success?
I'd like to say we have to remain disciplined. And I like to say, as Black people, let's go look at what happened with the Afrikaners after the 1902 Treaty of Vereeniging. They came out of the war. They were devastated by the war. They were poor. And when they got their freedom and started working in mining in the mines, what happened is they became quite excessive and expressive about the progress that they had made.
Yes.
Then you had the crash of 1929 that also crashed the gold because South Africa was a major export of gold, all the way to 1933. Many of them were indebted at the time, and it taught them discipline to actually manage money better. And you look at many of the Africans, look at the farmers, and look at many of them, they don't wear the most expensive clothes, but the guys have money, right? Look at us now. Our 1902 was 1994.
Yes.
And there was a time when, as Black people, we were called the Black Diamonds, right? Because we were the people who were spending money. We were coming through and we were spending money and trying to enjoy the luxuries of life. And we ended up heavily indebted into 2008, right? And my hope was that we can see changed attitude, just that like we saw with the Afrikaners after the 1933, the changed attitudes. There have been changed attitudes after 2008 in terms of people treating money with respect. But I don't know if my sense is that it is not enough. We are still seeing less discipline. And I think when it comes to money, as a society, as a Black nation, there's so much buying power that we have collectively. We could do so much more. We could sacrifice. I mean, one of the things that often bothers me is about, do people want to get these grants that they're getting? I don't think they take any pride in that. Why are we not taking that money and creating a firm where these people can generate consistent income and they off the state coffers and they can run if people sacrifice 12 months and they end up with shares in a company that generates money on a sustained basis and supports something in society, we could make a big difference. But the challenge is that firstly, we're not pulling the same direction, we're not disciplined enough. And we need to be conscious that people may take advantage of that. Other nations may take advantage of that for the long term.
Zwelakhe, you've said a lot, and it was really great having the conversation with you. And I think you've dropped some interesting gems, and hopefully our audience will reflect upon that. So if you've really enjoyed this conversation and you want to hear more conversations like Zwelakhe, make sure that you subscribe to the Success Rate podcast. Click on the notification button so you know when we post new episodes. And I'm looking forward to spending more time with you and listening to other interesting stories like our guest today. Zwelakhe, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Thuli, for having me. Appreciate it.